Welcome, night owls. Welcome back to Midnight FM, where the shadows stretch long and the night never truly ends. Tonight, we are joined once again by Grandpa Joseph. Those of you who have followed his stories know that his past is stitched with shadows, echoes of things most of us only whisper about. We've heard about the lantern light that lured his friends into the woods. We've heard about the farmhouse on Willow Creek Road, where the walls themselves seem to breathe. But tonight's story takes us someplace quieter, simpler. A place that looks harmless on the surface, but hides its darkness in plain sight. Tonight, we go into the fields, the hollow field.
Thank you, Jacob. It's strange, the things that cling to you. You can grow old, raise a family, travel far away, and yet some memories won't let go. For me, one of those memories is from the summer of 1958, when I was just 13 years old. My parents had me stay with my Uncle Ray on his farm in Illinois. It was supposed to be good for me. Hard work, fresh air, responsibility. And for the most part, it was. I helped with the animals, fed the chickens, hauled water, learned to drive the old tractor. But what I remember most are the fields. The farm stretched wide, nothing but corn and wheat as far as the eye could see. When the wind blew, the stalks moved like waves on an ocean. Soft, endless, hypnotic. I'd sit on the porch sometimes and watch the sunset bleed across those fields. And for a moment, it was beautiful. But when the light faded, those fields changed. They weren't almond anymore. They became vast, black, hollow things, swallowing sound and shape. You couldn't see where they ended. You couldn't see what was moving in them. And that's when the scarecrows came alive. Now, don't get me wrong, every farm had scarecrows back then, stuffed with straw, clothes all tattered, arms stretched wide on wooden beams. My uncle had half a dozen of them scattered across the fields, each standing watch over its patch of crops. But his were different, bigger, taller, and he never let me get too close. I remember the first time I asked him about him. It was late afternoon, we were finishing chores, and I pointed to the one closest to the barn. Uncle Ray, why is it wearing a mask? Because it did. It had a burlap sack tied over its face, stitched tight with twine. And instead of a painted smile or button eyes like most scarecrows, it had nothing, just blank fabric. He looked at me real stern and said, "Joseph, you stay away from those. You hear me? You don't go near them, and you sure as hell don't look at them after sundown." I laughed at first, thought he was just trying to spook me. But the way he said it, his voice low, his eyes fixed hard on mine, it wasn't a joke.
That light, lying in the guest room, I couldn't sleep. The window looked straight out onto the fields, and in the pale moonlight, I saw them. 6 dark figures, arms stretched wide, watching. I told myself they were just straw and wood, but then one of them moved. Not much, just a tilt of the head. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, When I looked again, it was standing straight as ever. Still, I pulled the curtain shut. A few days later, I asked Uncle Ray again. This time he was sitting at the table, coffee steaming, his face drawn tight from lack of sleep. "Uncle," I said, "why do they have masks? Why don't they have faces?" He set his cup down hard enough to spill some. "They don't need faces. They've got enough of their own." I didn't know what he meant, but the look in his eyes told me not to press. Then came the warning. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long, Uncle Ray called me over. We stood at the edge of the porch, staring out at the fields. The scarecrows were out there, dark against the gold of the wheat. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Joseph," he said, "you can walk this farm all you like. Go to the barn, the creek, even the woods if you've a mind to. But don't go into the fields after dark. Ever. You hear me? Not for any reason." I nodded, but my curiosity burned hotter than his warning. Why would he say something like that? Unless there was something to fear. That night, I woke to a sound. A whisper. Soft, drifting through the open window. At first, I thought it was a wind, but then I heard my name, clear as day. Joseph. Drawn out, low, like it was coming from all around. I sat up, heart pounding. The curtains fluttered, and I knew, without looking, that the sound was coming from the fields. I tried to stay in bed. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity, that old devil, it pulled me to the window. I parted the curtains just an inch, and there they were. 6 scarecrows standing exactly where they had before, but this time their heads were all turned toward the house, toward the sea.
I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The whisper came again, closer. "Joseph." And I knew then Uncle Ray's warning wasn't just about the fields. It was about them. The scarecrows. The next morning, I told myself it had been a dream. The scarecrows hadn't moved. They couldn't have. But the image stuck with me. The way their blank faces had all turned toward the house. I tried to put it out of my mind, but that day, Uncle Ray caught watching the fields more than once. He'd stop mid-chore, hat pulled low, eyes fixed on the scarecrows like a man waiting for a storm. And that night, I heard him lock the doors, every one of them. A few evenings later, something happened that burned itself into me forever. We'd finished supper and were sitting by the fire when Uncle Ray suddenly stiffened. He set his pipe down and turned his head toward the window. I didn't hear anything at first, just the crickets and the wind. But then, faint but clear, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, crunching across the dry earth outside the house. Uncle Ray grabbed his shotgun from above the mantel. "Stay here," he told me, his voice low and sharp. But I didn't listen. I crept after him, peeking around the corner as he eased open the back door. The night air rushed in, cool and thick with the smell of wheat. The yard was empty, but the fields rippled, though there was no wind. Uncle Ray lifted the shotgun, eyes scanning. Then he muttered something under his breath, a prayer, I think. And slowly, he backed inside, locking the door behind him. I whispered,
What was it?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, his face pale, and said, "Don't ever go out there after dark, Joseph. Not if you want to see the sun again." Of course, a warning like that only fed my curiosity, and 1 week later, I broke it. It was a moonless night, sky black as tar. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it again, the whisper, "Joseph." This time, it wasn't soft, it was insistent, calling. I crept to the window, and there they were, 6 scarecrows. But they weren't standing in their usual spots. They had moved closer, maybe 10 feet closer to the house, and every one of their heads was tilted, listening.
My chest tightened. I wanted to scream for Uncle Ray, but something held me. It felt like if I made a sound, if I broke the silence, they'd know. They'd come. So instead, I did something worse. I slipped out of bed, eased the window open, and climbed outside. The night air was thick, heavy, pressing down on me as I crept toward the fields. My bare feet sank into the cool dirt, each step louder than I wanted. The scarecrows stood still, arms stretched wide. But as I got closer, I saw it. Their hands weren't straw. They weren't wood. They were bone. Thin, sharp bones wrapped in rags jutting out from the sleeves. I stopped dead, my heart slamming. The whisper came again, but this time it was all around me. Not one voice, dozens, low, hissing. "Joseph, Joseph." The scarecrow swayed gently as if moved by a breeze I couldn't feel. And then one of them stepped down from its post. The sound it made wasn't wrong, not the thud of boots on soil, but a dry crack like old wood snapping. It stood there, head tilted, that blank sack of a face staring right at me. Another climbed down, and another, until 3 of them stood on the ground, arms twitching, heads lolling. I'd stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. Then I ran, straight back to the house, but the earth behind me cracked and split with each step they took, their whiskers following like a storm. I reached the porch, yanked at the door, but it was locked. I banged my fists against it, screaming for Uncle Ray. And then, hands grabbed me, not the scarecrows, Uncle Ray's. He hauled me inside, slammed the door shut, and shoved a heavy bar across it. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, sobbing. He didn't shout at me. He didn't scold. He just stared at me with that same pale, hollow look. "You looked at them, didn't you?" he whispered. I nodded, and his face sank lower. Then it's too late. The rest of that night, we didn't sleep. We sat by the fire, shotgun across his lap, the house shaking with the sound of footsteps outside, circling, pacing, waiting. Every so often, the whispers pressed against the windows, faint but clear. My name, always my name. I dawned. The fields were still. The scarecrows were back on their posts, arms stretched, heads bowed, as if nothing had happened.
But I knew they weren't just scarecrows. And I knew they wanted me. The sun rose that morning like nothing had happened. The chickens clucked as the cows lowed. The tractor coughed a knife. But I knew, and Uncle Ray knew too. He barely looked at me over breakfast, just sat there sipping coffee, staring out the window at the fields like a man watching a graveyard.
After a long silence, he finally spoke. "You brought their eyes on you, Joseph." His voice was flat, drained, like he'd already buried me. I swallowed hard. "Uncle, what are they?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set his cup down, rubbed his weathered hands across his face, and sighed. "Back before this was farmland," he said slowly, "this ground was different. Hollow ground, they called it. The tribes that lived here, they would plant it, wouldn't hunt near it. Said the land was hungry." He leaned closer. "And when the first settlers came, people disappeared. Whole families vanished into the fields." I felt my stomach knot. "But the scarecrows!" "They ain't scarecrows," he cut me off. "Not really. They're bindings, wards, old thieves dressed up in straw and cloth to look harmless. They keep the hunger down, keep it from walking the fields free." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But only if you respect them. Only if you don't draw their attention." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at my plate, too afraid to eat. And from then on, every night I heard them. Whispers brushing against the windows. Footsteps circling the house. Sometimes scratching. Sometimes tapping, like they were testing the walls, waiting for me to slip up. Uncle Ray kept the shotgun close. He nailed iron horseshoes above the doors, sprinkled salt on the windowsills, and muttered prayers under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. But none of it made me feel safe. Not when I knew those blank faces were out there, turned towards me in the dark. One night, the whispers grew louder. Not just my name this time. Other words. Ones I didn't understand. Stretched and twisted, crawling into my ears like worms. I clamped my hands over my head, but it didn't stop. The voices were inside me. Pressing, pulling, calling. That was the night they crossed a fence. I woke to the sound of the dogs barking, frantic, snarling like their throats were tearing. Uncle Ray was already at the door, shotgun in hand, eyes wild. "Stay behind me," he barked as he threw the door open. The yard was chaos, chickens screeching, dogs lunging at the fields. And in the moonlight, I saw them. The scarecrows. Not in the fields anymore, but in the yard. 4 of them stood by the barn, one by the well, and one, God help me, stood just 10 feet from the porch. Its head tilted, that blank sack of face pointed straight at me. Uncle Ray raised the shotgun. The blast shattered the night, echoing across the fields. The nearest scarecrow staggered back, straw bursting from its chest. But it didn't fall. It straightened, and it kept walking.
The others moved too, jerking, twitching, their limbs bending in ways no man's ever should. The dogs leapt at them, teeth sinking into burlap and rags. The scarecrows didn't fight. They just grabbed the dogs by the necks and twisted. bones snapped like twigs. The dogs went silent. I stumbled back, my stomach heaving. Uncle Ray fired again, cursing, screaming me to run. We bolted inside, slamming the door, throwing the bar across. But the scarecrows didn't stop. They pressed against the walls, their bony fingers scratching at the windows, tapping at the glass. Not breaking in, not yet. Just reminding us they could. We huddled by the fire all night, the shotgun across Uncle Ray's lap, his hands shaking. The whispers filled every corner of the house, soft, relentless. Joseph, Joseph, always my name, as if they wanted me, and only me. By dawn, they were gone. The yard was still, the fence line empty, but the dogs lay broken and in the dirt. Uncle Ray buried them that morning, without a word. And when he came back inside, he looked at me, his face hollow. "They won't stop now," he said. "You should have never looked at him." That night, I lay awake, the sheets clinging to my skin with sweat. I knew it was only a matter of time. The scarecrows weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting for me to make one wrong move. And I knew sooner or later I'd have to face them in the fields. The final night came without warning. The air was heavy, hotter than usual, as if the whole farm was holding its breath. The sky was clear, but no stars shone. The fields stood still, black and endless, their stalks rising like walls around us. And I knew they were waiting. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, staring into that sea of corn, when I saw it. One scarecrow, closer than before, standing just beyond the fence, its arms outstretched, its blank face tilted at me. I blinked, and suddenly there were 3, then 5, then all 6, right at the fence line. I shouted for Uncle Ray, and he came running, shotgun in hand. But before he could raise it, the whispers rose, not soft this time, loud, violent. They rolled over the fields like thunder, shaking the air, drilling into my skull. My name over and over, twisted into a chant. Joseph, Joseph, Joseph. The scarecrows stepped over the fence, one by one, their limbs jerking, their joints cracking, their sacks splitting at the seams. Beneath the burlap I saw it, not straw, not cloth, but faces, pressed against the fabric from the inside, mouths opening and closing, eyes rolling, trapped souls clawing to get out. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. Uncle Ray fired. The blast, tearing one apart. But the pieces twitched, writhing in the dirt, dragging themselves back together. I screamed. He fired again and again, but nothing stopped them. The scarecrows closed in, circling us, their whispers shaking the walls of the house. And then one spoke clearly, not a whisper, a voice from behind that stitched sack. Come to the field. The next moment, the window shattered. Arms shot through, clawing, grasping, pulling at us.
Uncle Ray shoved me toward the stairs. "Go, Joseph, up now!" We bolted to the second floor, but the scarecrows followed, climbing the walls, dragging themselves through the windows like spiders. The house groaned under their weight. It wasn't safe anymore. That's when I heard the back door burst open, and the whispers turned to laughter. They weren't just coming in, they were hurting me, pushing me toward the fields. Uncle Ray grabbed my shoulders, his eyes burning with fear and fury. He listened to me, boy. If they take you into the hollow, you don't come back. You fight them with everything you got, you hear me? Don't you let them keep you. I wanted to stay. I wanted to cling to him, but the scarecrows were already in the house, and there was nowhere left to run except outside. I crashed through the front door, stumbling into the dirt, and the field swallowed me. The stalks rose high above my head, thick and choking, the path twisting no matter which way I turned. The scarecrows moved between them, always ahead, always behind, their whispers slithering through the corn. "Joseph, come home. Joseph." I ran until my legs gave out, and that's when I saw it. A clearing in the middle of the field. 6 posts stood there, tall and crooked, and tied to them were sacks. Old burlap masks, torn and rotted. They hung limp, but I knew what they were. The originals, the first bindings. As I stared, the scarecrows emerged from the corn, circling me. They stretched their arms, their heads lolling, their sacks splitting wider to reveal the screaming faces within. I dropped to my knees, sobbing. "Why me?" I cried. "Why do you want me?" One stepped forward. Its voice came clear, hollow. "Because you looked." They lunged. Dozens of hands reached for me, claws scratching my skin. I screamed, thrashing, pulling against them, but their grip was iron. They dragged me toward one of the empty posts, raising me high, twisting ropes of straw around my arms. I felt the sack lowering toward my face, hot, smothering, and inside it I heard the screams of the others pressed against my ears. Eddie's voice, Samuel's, Mark's, even voices I didn't know, all crying for release. And then a shotgun blast. The scarecrow holding me staggered back, the sack tearing away. Uncle Ray stood at the edge of the clearing, smoke curling from the barrel. "Run, Joseph!" he roared. I didn't think. I just ran. Through the corn, through the dark, my lungs burning, the whispers clawing at my mind. I burst into the yard, collapsing on the porch. When I looked back, the scarecrows weren't chasing. They stood at the edge of the field, arms raised, heads bowed, watching, waiting. Uncle Ray stumbled out behind me, pale, bleeding from scratches I hadn't seen before. He dropped the shotgun, sank to his knees, and whispered, "They won't stop, Joseph. Not ever. They've marked you now." And he was right, because even now, all these years later, I still hear them. When the wind rattles through the trees, when the night is too quiet, the whispers return. Joseph, calling me back to the fields. And one day, I fear I'll answer.
You've been listening to Midnight FM, and that was Grandpa Joseph with The Hollow Fields. Fields meant to grow life, hiding only death. Bindings meant to protect, becoming prisons of souls. And a boy's curiosity, opening the door to something that should never have been seen. It makes you wonder how many scarecrows standing silent across farmlands tonight are just straw and cloth, and how many are waiting, watching, whispering your name. We thank Grandpa Joseph for braving the memories that never let go. And to you, night owls, thank you for walking with us into the fields of shadow. Remember, if you ever hear your name drifting from the corn at midnight, don't answer. This is Jacob signing off from Midnight FM. Sleep if you can.